Hello,
and today we'll be taking a look at Final Girl by Ryder Games. The game, I will say right up front, is a true solo game, and an extremely well made one at that. When I say this is a true solo game, that means it's not a cooperative 1 to 4 players kind of thing. It is one player and one player only. So if you aren't the kind of person to play board games alone, then you can pass on this one right now. However, if you do enjoy horror and solo gaming, then this game might just be the one for you. Final Girl is a horror-themed game that takes its inspiration from the famous horror movies throughout history, from 80s era slashers like Friday the 13th all the way up to the modern horror home invasion movies like The Strangers. And this game takes its horror inspiration seriously, really putting you into a game and making every effort to put that horror movie feel on full display. In this game you will play as the Final Girl, a popular horror trope where the last survivor, almost always a young woman, has to fight off the killer, hence the name Final Girl. As the Final Girl, your objective in this game is simple: save as many victims as you can and defeat the killer. Now, what really makes Final Girl stand out from the crowd is its modular approach that allows for massive replayability and a wide variety of challenge. How does this work? Well, it's quite simple and ingenious, both from a gaming standpoint and a business standpoint. To play Final Girl, you'll need to buy the core set, which provides you with the tools and rules to play the game. Dice, cards, meeples, tokens, a player board, and of course, the all-important rulebook. And that's it. What is noticeably absent from the core set is any form of game. That's because in addition to buying your core set, you will need to pick up one of these feature cassette boxes. Each feature box is based on a different horror movie, and the game contained within it is themed in line with the movie it takes its inspiration from. For example, the Happy Trails Horror lets you play a game that feels like Friday the 13th, while Frightmare on Maple Lane gives you an experience like that of Nightmare on Elm Street. And each feature really leans into this, having their own unique special rules, location board, killer, and not one, but 2 Final Girl characters for you to play that are inspired by the film they are based on. Each feature is presented in these really cool VHS cassette style boxes that look great on your gaming shelf. The box itself is a very smart design, as the lid and the base of this box are magnetised and lift off to reveal the killer board and location board. And contained within each side of the box is 2 separate compartments with all the cards, rules and specialty pieces needed for you to play a game using that killer or that location. This is great for organisation, and it really helps keep the killer and location separate, which is quite important. This is how the modular part of the game works, because you can pick and choose the killer and location from your collection. For example, the Happy Trails Horror feature cassette comes with Hans the Butcher as its killer, and the Camp Happy Trails as its location, while Frightmare on Maple Lane features the killer Dr. Fright and the location Maple Lane. But if you have both of these features, the game is designed for you to mix any killer with any location, putting Hans the Butcher on Maple Lane or Dr. Fright in Camp Happy Trails. And of course, the more features you have, the more combinations you can make, each providing a unique challenge and experience, as the killers can feel very different in different environments. This is a pretty ingenious way to market the game, as you, the customer, can pick up the features you like the look of best, and they are quite cheap. Yes, the cost will stack up as you buy more and more features, but you're only going to do that if you really like the game. It may feel like a bit of a rip-off that the core set doesn't come with any gameplay, but because of the pricing model, the core set and a single feature will probably cost you between £30 and £40, which is in line with how much I would expect a game like this to cost. Some places also sell the core box with the Happy Trails Horror as a set, and if you can find this, it's probably the best way to start with the game, as Happy Trails is the simplest killer and location combination. That being said, the game is not too complex, and if you see a feature based on a horror film you particularly love, there's nothing wrong with starting there. For me, this was Panic at Station 2891, taking its inspiration from John Carpenter's 1982 masterpiece The Thing. But after only a few games against the dreaded organism in the Arctic Research Station, I realised this system was something special, and so my collection quickly grew to include features based on both films I loved and those that presented interesting mechanics. So, how does the game work? How will you save the victims and defeat the killer? With the tried and tested tools of any horror movie protagonist, of course, dice and cards. In Final Girl, you will use action cards to perform the various actions you need to beat the game, such as moving, searching, and eventually, when you feel ready to take on the terrifying killer, attacking. When you play one of these cards, you will roll a number of dice based on your horror level, and the more successes you roll, the more effective the action is. For example, when you walk, if you roll 2 successes, you may move up to 2 spaces. 1 success, you may move 1, and if you fail to roll any successes, then you may still move 1 space, but at the cost of 1 damage, indicated by this icon here. And you will notice this little red egg timer icon here. This tells you how much time you lose for performing the action. Let's take a quick look at the player board to help make this a little clearer. On the player board, you have this numbered time track down the side. At the start of the game, you will have 6 units of time, and after you play an action, you will move the timer token down this track by the number of red time icons displayed on the action card you used. Usually, failing an action costs you more time, and getting more successes can decrease the time cost. If the timer token ever reaches 0, the action phase immediately ends, and you move on to the planning phase, which we will cover in a moment. The other part of the player board is the horror track. The horror track is what determines how many dice you will roll when performing an action. The more scared you are, the less dice you roll. Horror is something you will need to manage heavily if you want to succeed, as the difference between rolling 2 dice and 3 dice is massive. That's because of the way the dice and cards interact. This star symbol on the die is a success, and there are 2 of those on each die, meaning a 1 in 3 chance of rolling a success. However, each die also has 2 of these faces that has a symbol depicting 2 cards. If you roll this symbol, you may discard 2 of the cards from your hand to convert that symbol into a success. This means if you have a few extra cards in your hand that you are willing to part with, you have a much better chance of getting at least 1 success. And that's the action phase. Play cards, roll dice. Now, the planning phase is the second part of a turn. The planning phase is where you buy new cards to add to your hand. To do this, you have to spend time. Each action card has this grey time icon in the corner here, which shows you how much time you will have to spend to add it to your hand. But your turn ended with 0 time, right? Right, so how can you spend it to buy these cards? Well, that is why you can choose to end your action phase at any time. And on many occasions, you will want to end it early, saving time to get those cards, allowing you to have one big turn where you have access to all the actions you need. I love the thematic nature of this. It feels like the final girl is taking her time, creeping around and avoiding the killer, and then, in the planning phase, she's figuring out her situation and deciding what she is going to do. It really brings up memories of all those kinds of scenes in horror movies. So, after you have bought all the cards you can afford or want, you will reset the time track to a time value of 6 and then advance to the killer phase. In the killer phase, the first thing you do is draw a terror card from the terror deck. This is a deck of 10 cards which is made up of a mixture of cards from the killer you are facing and the location you are in. Each killer and location has its own unique terror cards with a matching back, but an icon on the card face helps you to separate these for storage. The terror cards will do a variety of things, perhaps increasing the killer's movement for the turn, or maybe some new unsuspecting victims arrive. The terror deck will often throw a spanner in the works for you, although sometimes it might just save your skin, as the killer right next to you suddenly decides to attack a hapless victim on the other side of the map. After the terror card is resolved, each killer has its own unique activation, shown on the killer board here. Usually, this is moving a number of spaces and performing a number of attacks. While we are looking at the killer board, it's worth looking at this track here, the Bloodlust track. Each time the killer claims a victim, this track advances, and as it does so, the killer becomes more powerful, eventually activating their dark power, which makes them even more deadly. Once the killer has performed its action, the killer phase ends, and you will move on to the panic phase. The panic phase only triggers if a victim has been killed this turn and the killer is in a space with other victims. Those remaining victims then flee in random directions, determined by dice rolled and numbered markings on the board spaces. Finally is the upkeep phase, where if there are no terror cards left, you will reveal the finale card, the killer's ultimate endgame power. And that is the basics of Final Girl. Of course, there is a lot more to this game, and I barely covered any of it, but a lot of this stuff is better to find out for yourself. So let's take a look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good. Honestly, almost everything. This game works so well from its dice and card synergy, allowing for random uncertainty from dice rolls, coupled with a brilliant dice mitigation system by sacrificing cards. It is very rare in Final Girl that you will find you had a wasted turn. The game is dripping in theme. Each feature really makes you feel like you are playing through the movie that inspired it, using mechanics and terror cards that fit well with your chosen location and killer, making for varied and interesting games. It's also a pretty short game, lasting about 30 minutes to an hour. The bad. Meeples. Meeples are boring. Fortunately, you can buy miniatures packs for the Killer and Final Girls, but you have to buy them for the entire season. Each season of Final Girl consists of 5 features, and so if you buy the miniatures box, you may be buying miniatures for features you don't have, which is a little annoying. For some of you, Meeples might not be a bad aspect, but I like theme and immersion. It's a big part of the game for me, and a game that excels in every other area of immersion I feel is massively let down by your brave Final Girl being represented by a little pink meeple, and the terrifying killer is a little red meeple. Kind of lame. Honestly, I don't have much else bad to say about this game. Sometimes it can be a bit swingy and is frustrating when you have 3 or 4 really bad turns in a row and you quickly realise you can't win, but then it's a short game and quick to reset and start over again, so even that isn't a big deal. The ugly. Again, there's not a lot to say here. For the most part, the game is incredibly well put together. The only thing I find messy and ugly is the discard system when placing cards. After playing a card, you will discard it. Then, during the planning phase, any card played in that previous action phase is unavailable to purchase during the planning phase. This means you need a separate pile for cards played and a separate pile for cards available to purchase. Sometimes it can get a bit messy, a bit ugly, and of course, after completing the planning phase, you will return all played cards from the previous action phase to the deck of purchasable cards. If you forget to do this, you can end up confused over which cards are available and which aren't. It's a little messy, but it's not too bad, and a good organisation system or the playmat you can buy, this becomes a non-issue. But that's the only ugly part of the game I can really think of. So, conclusion. Do I recommend this game? If you play games solo, yes, absolutely I recommend you buy this. Unless you have a real dislike for horror, then perhaps give it a miss, but the mechanics and gameplay are so good, even if you are not a horror fan, so long as you don't hate horror, you will probably get a lot of fun out of this game. Anyway, I'm bored of reviewing this game now. Bye.